Welcome to the Race, Manhood, and Power podcast, recorded live on location at the African War College, your temporary way station for African liberators. I'm your host and correspondent, Professor Omowale, and you can find me online at omowaleafrika.com and across all social media at Omowale Afrika. Here at the African War College, when we see a fellow African, we greet each other using the term Abibi Fahudie, which means Black liberation in the Twi language spoken by the people of Ghana. And while we recognize that it is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, the Race, Manhood, and Power podcast is unapologetic in our assignment to restore manhood in our community, for there is no path to Black liberation that does not involve the resurrection of Black men.
Let's talk race, manhood, and power. Let's talk black empowerment, black building for all of these black children and all of these black women. We don't stress them, we protect them, provide and we lead, how we sticking to the essence. It's race, manhood, and power, now peep the message. My brother Omowale gonna change the perspective and teach the collective as we ride for our brothers, stand with our sisters, and ride for each other. Let's have a conversation for the young black nation, a bill with the minds, uplift the vibration. It's black liberation, and that's the foundation. So stick to the code, the truth shall be told. We liberate the mind, the soul, and the body. Race, manhood, and power with Omowale. Tap in.
So don't allow fear to back you off this shit that you know you're supposed to be doing. And as a man, that's an unforgivable act. We're the guardians. We're the soldiers. We're the warriors. We built for sacrifice. We are built to overcome fear. This is what we live for and die for. All right? So you just gotta remember that. Take those principles with you. You're not the body. Fear is not bad. Courage is the mastery of fear.
Leading the charge on the battlefield with blood upon my blade. Be all African, determined not to be nobody's slave. My adrenaline is rushing, feeling imperious the pain. They won't stop until we're dead or be subservient again. What I'm fighting for is bigger than we. For a future where our kids can be free, that's worth dying for. Shit. But I plan to let this iron off, and I don't want reform, so I'm applying force. Receive instructions from the ancestors, fighting to the last man. The final conflict is the last stand. This is good versus evil, the lion versus the eagle. This is God versus the evils, war to liberate my people. Yeah, I smell the blood in the air. A brother falling, then you pick up despair. Ask the soldier for protection and help you fight in spite of the fear. Help to keep me on point and prepared. There should be no mercy given, and none should be expected if my name ain't remembered. I passed along my weapon to the next generations. We are the reflections of the one who forged the blade, the one who formed the insurrection. Yeah, I'm just living out this legacy. This is what the ancestors left for me. See, it's freedom or it's death for me. Freedom or it's death. This is what the ancestors left for me. It's freedom or it's death for me. Yeah, I smell the blood in the air. A soldier falling, then you pick up the spear. Whether legacy or weaponry, you hold the line in spite of the fear. A soldier falling, then you pick up the spear. Yeah, tell him, I smell the blood in the air. A soldier falling, then you pick up the spear. Whether legacy or weaponry, you hold the line in spite of the fear. A soldier falling, then you pick up the spear. Yeah, listen. You have the answer to the ancestors. You had the power, chose the coward, left the man stranded. What Baba Oba calls a pandemic, you should have organized and showed this black man different. Listen, it's just a global game of chess that's between these white elites at the expense of the oppressed. Turn the ballot to a bullet, your vote into a shotty. Turn a protest to a riot, it's like correction and uprising. Yeah, we fight with dignity and honor. Machete chop for every cop who killed Brianna. Let's get a fuck truck, but America's the problem. We'll pass your voting booth and pass you the revolver. Yeah, I'm just living out this legacy. This what the ancestors left for me. See, it's freedom or it's death for me.
Freedom or it's death for me.
What the ancestors left for me. It's freedom or it's death for me.
As you possess this blade, it will possess you.
So be it.
The spirit of the blade speaks.
All right, what up, y'all? That was Pick Up the Spear by Brother Bomani UFG off that United Front. We got a dope show lined up for y'all tonight. This is installment 2 in the Sowells of Black Folk series. I apologize. We had to deviate, right, last week, but I told y'all we'll be right back on track, right? So tonight's topic, right, installment 2 on the Sowells of Black Folks, we're dealing with the political Eunuchism of divested politics. And y'all see I got my Professor Omowale's on, right? So that means what? That means I came to teach. So I hope that you are here to learn, right? So make sure you have a notepad, some water, whatever it is that you need. This is going to be a really good build, but we're going to get into it. But before we get into tonight's topic, as always, let me take a quick break for my sponsors, and we'll come back and get right into tonight's show.
I want to give a major shout out to one of our supporters, Thread by Denise. They're a great source for your African influenced clothing and accessories. They have everything from skirts, bow ties, and tees. If you've ever seen me rocking that Nat Turner University shirt and you want to know where I got it from, well, I got it from Thread by Denise. Head on over there using the link in my description and use the coupon code MANHOOD to get 20% off your first order. The International Black Freedom Alliance. You can find out more about this org by visiting the IBFA.org. Once again, that is the IBFA.org. At the Black Freedom Alliance, they believe that Black people are smart enough, talented enough, skilled enough, resourceful enough, and resilient enough to organize our own freedom all by ourselves. The question is, do you believe the same? If you do, head over to the IBFA.org. Give a shout out to my brother, Tori Russell, who's running things over there. Tell him Omowale Afrika sent you from the Race, Manhood, and Power podcast. Color Compton is all about building communities across cultures and generations through history and the arts. You can visit their website at colorcompton.org. That is COLORCOMPTON.org. At Color Compton, they believe in the importance of knowing and focusing on histories of people of color. By exploring the roots of our ancestors in this land nationally and locally, we hope to educate all and build true coalitions across ethnic groups. So shout out to Color Compton doing great work out there in the city of Compton. The Black Family Blueprint is a Twin Cities-based company focused on the health, sustainability, and interpersonal dynamic of Black families. Black Family Blueprint aspires to support the social capital development of Black families by building internal and external practices of grounded coherency. The company employs an evidence-based model of practice while partnering with families and community organizations to best serve the well-being of family development. Please head over to blackfamilyblueprint.com right now. Head over to blackfamilyblueprint.com. This is an amazing business that is headed up by a husband and wife couple, my brother Adrian and his wife, Sister Oyolanda. Please do head over and tell them Professor Omowale from the Race, Manhood, and Power podcast sent you.
All right, I got to give a big shout out to my sponsors. As always, I keep telling y'all, if y'all rock with me, they rock with me. So that means if y'all rock with me, y'all rock with them, right? So make sure y'all hit the links, go over there and support my sponsors. Let them know that Professor Omowale sent you. All right, to my folks in the audience, if you want to support the show, there's 3 ways in which you can support. As always, you can send a one-time Cash App, right? Via Cash App, $Strike Drum. You can become a Patreon member, right? So head over to the Patreon community, aka the African War College, and enroll today. And last but not least, if you have a business, a product, and or a service that you'd like to advertise with the show, reach out. We're always looking for new sponsors to support the content, to support what we have going on here at the channel. So I appreciate y'all. I know that y'all appreciate me. We've been getting lots of good feedback. So this show, our programming and our content is doing what we intended it to do. So I just want to, a quick, round of applause to all of you for just continuing to come through every Manhood Monday and rock with me over here at the Race, Manhood, and Power podcast. Oh, and you might see, right, from the premiere, if you look down in the chat, we got the super chats now. So you can always show some love. You can send a super chat during the premiere or during the live, right? So that should be pretty fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to be the first person that sends a super chat to the show. So shout out to you in advance. I'm looking forward to seeing who it is. All right, let's get into it. All right, family. So I told y'all that the name of tonight's show was the political unicism of divested politics. But I just want to take a step back really quick before we dive in and kind of give y'all a bit of the backstory for how tonight's show came about, right? So, of course, this is installment 2 in the Sowells of Black Folk. So it's all building on from, episode 1 or installment 1, installment 2, installment 3, installment 4. But tonight's topic, I was watching, a brother who I've been following for some time now, Dr. Hasan Johnson. Initially started following him on Twitter and more recently discovered that he also had a YouTube presence. So I started to follow his YouTube as well. But he did he uploaded a video. I believe it was either back in July or August. I'm not sure of the time. But the name of the video was, "Is it time for black men to let go of the black love velvet painting?" And in this particular discussion, what he was attempting to do was to show, I guess, the ways in which black male aspirations to live up to this, I guess, black love image, that was very popular during the 70s, was really opening us up for exploitation, right? So there were definitely some interesting, points, made throughout the discussion, and I wouldn't wholesale write off anything that anybody says, right? One thing that being in this space has done for me is it's made me listen more and more to different arguments, right? I don't want to write off anybody's arguments just wholesale without first hearing what it is that they're trying to say. So to be fair, I did listen. And there was a particular segment during this, I guess it was a 3-hour discussion, where they started to talk about black nationalism. And some of the points that they made really didn't sit well with me. So I left a comment. Dr. Hasan, he definitely got back at me when I sent the comment. But this is what the comment said. It stated, "I'll come back to watch this again. But the 55-minute mark to about 1 hour and 2-minute mark is worthy of a response from the black nationalist community. These statements are close in nature to Yvette Carnell's declaration of Pan-Africanism being dead. I'd argue if black nationalism is dead, the same must be said of black manhood, but I'll speak on that in depth in my response," right? So tonight, the political unicism of divested politics is going to be my response. So towards the end of this video, I'll actually play the clip that I'm referring to, and I'll do a live response to what I'm hearing. Now, to be fair, Dr. Johnson responded, and his response was, "I didn't say it was dead. I said that it's never been prepared to deal with feminism," right? So that was his response. And it wasn't Dr. Johnson who said it was dead. It was another brother who was on the panel with him. There were 2 other brothers, Dr. Ron and the Green Gorilla, the G with a PhD, who I respect. I've listened to his content. I actually rock with his content. I just disagree with his assessment here, and we'll get into that tonight, of course, respectfully. And there was one other comment under this particular chain. I'll read it just because I'm reading. This isn't a live. Y'all know that I'm pre-recording. But I just feel like I want to give the entire context before we springboard into the discussion, right? So there was another brother who left a comment, and he wrote, "Pan-Africanism has been dead since the 60s. Time to wake up from that dream." And my reply to this brother was simply, "No, my brother. Black men have been politically castrated since the 60s. It's time to go back and pick our nuts up," right? So let's get into it, right? Because when I wrote that response to the brother, that's actually when I came up with this idea of a political eunuch. And then I tied the 2 together, right? The political unicism of divested politics, right? So you're probably asking, well, what is a political eunuch? There's folks who've done great work around this concept. Of course, Dr. Francis Cress-Welsing, Baba Baruti, Walimo Baruti has an entire book called Yurugu Eunuchs, where he deals with the cultural creation of the eunuch. But I'll explain it here very shortly, right? I'll try to be brief. So essentially a political eunuch or a cultural eunuch, whichever one you choose to use, is basically someone who's been socialized or politicized with the ultimate goal of that individual not to reproduce themselves, right? If I wanted to make it very simple, that would would probably be the definition that I would use. You've basically taken on a cultural paradigm where you are operating in a way that will ensure that your culture doesn't reproduce, right? So you're a cultural eunuch or a political eunuch. You've adopted a set of politics to ensure that your people don't reproduce, right? And those sets of politics I refer to as divested politics, right? So let's speak on that. Like, what is divested politics? Well, there are many different types of divested politics, right? In short, if I wanted to explain it, divested politics is anything that attempts to, disaggregate. Maybe I don't want to use the term disaggregate because it's okay to use disaggregation if we're talking about analysis, right? So I don't want to muddy the waters by using that particular term. But divested politics is when we try to separate ourselves from the collective or try to escape, right, the burden of the collective or the burden of blackness, right? So you see this all the time, right? It's like, if you think of Black or African people or African descendant people as a body, divested politics would be folks attempting to, chop parts of the body up, right? Let me cut the foot off so I can escape, from slavery, so to speak, right? It's this idea that our chances of survival are better apart than they are as a group. Okay, so what is divested politics? Divested politics is essentially any type of politic or movement where subsets within the larger black body politic seek to separate themselves from the group in order to avoid the harm being inflicted on the group by the system of racism and white supremacy, right? Essentially, it's when Black people try to separate themselves from the body with the idea that as an individual or an individual unit or a smaller subset, their chances of aligning themselves with the white supremacist system and gaining some type of power or benefit or privilege are greater than trying to do so as a collective, right? So you see this in many different ways. I mean, you can look at it like on the class level where the so-called bourgeois or the assimilationist Negroes seek to separate themselves from the rest of the group because the rest of the group is a burden that is too heavy to bear. I'll actually show a good clip of that of Skip the Truth Gates, where he kind of speaks to it very plainly, right? This idea that we can kind of like disaggregate ourselves as a population, and then the separate kind of like disaggregated groups can, navigate through the system and kind of like negotiate with the system on their own terms, right? They stand a better chance of doing it as individual groups than doing it as a collective, right? So that's a good example. Of course, like ADOS and FBA, right? These are examples of divested politics, attempting to divest or disassociate themselves with the larger Black populace, right? Because, hey, I mean, we're right here in America, right? We can negotiate with white supremacy. We have certain privileges that other groups don't have. So it's better for us to say, fuck the rest of the group and figure out, how we can improve our chances as a smaller subset, right? ADOS, FBA. You see this with Black women divestor groups, folks who are so-called leaving Blackistan, right? Black women who are like, Black women going their own way. We're going to go and marry white men or marry other men, just find a way to separate ourselves from the group. Same thing with Black men. Save yourself, Black men, introspective Black men of reform, all these different groups that are trying to figure out ways to negotiate with the system as individuals, right? Rather than as a collective, right? Because the system of white supremacy is not going to absorb the collective, right? It's almost, it's very interesting. Like intersectionality is a way in which people chop their identity up into smaller subsets, and then they use those pieces of their identity as currency to trade on and negotiate within this system in order to gain power and access and privilege, right? Things of that sort. So Divested politics in many ways are very interesting, right? But at the core, it represents defeatism, right? We're already defeated. Like as a group or as a people, we're not about to do this. Like white supremacy is dominating us. So the best that we can hope for is to get on the program of the white man and figure out what type of gains can be had with me negotiating as an individual, right? So that's really what it comes down to. So in the office hours today, we can talk about that in more detail, but I just wanted to give you a basic kind of like understanding of what we're talking about when I say divested politics, right? So you got the political unit part, right? Political unicism, and now you have the divested politics. So that's the discussion for today, the political unicism of divested politics. So I want to start by just showing a very quick clip of Skip Gates, because I think he does a great example of demonstrating this, right? He shows a form of hypergamous manhood, right? Because as a man, when you divest, right? When you give up on your people or give up on your nation, what you're hoping to do is be absorbed by another group of men, right? So we're going to get into that, right? Because you're like, forget building my own institutions, forget building up my nation and building for my people. Nah, the white man has already built it. So I'm just going to go over here and get on his program and I'm going to play his game, because as an individual, right, I can do a lot better, working within his economy or within his nation or within his paradigm. But trying to do that on my own is just a great deal of work. And, I'm already defeated. I'm already subjugated. So I'm just going to really get on this program, right? So y'all get that? Let me go ahead really quick. And I want to play this clip here of Skip the Truth Gates. This is a clip, again, from the early 90s. I think this panel was in 1991. And it was the responsibility of Black intellectuals in the age of crack. And I want you to listen to Skip Gates and listen to him very closely. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play this clip, and then we'll be right back.
Lived only with their mothers. In 1990, that number was 51.2%. In 1960, finally, 2% of our children had mothers who had never been married. In 1990, that number was 35%. What's happened is that our community has been divided into two. We have two Black communities, not one. We probably have more than that. And each of us has a tendency to speak of the Black community as if Blackness is a class. And we have to decide if Blackness really does constitute a class, and if it does, how it does, and if it doesn't, how it doesn't, and what that means. And until we start with that question, until we recognize the fact that these statistics now exist and that the community that we were children in no longer exists, and there is a new Black community or new Black communities out there, and if we are trying to put it back together, then we have to recognize that reality and then talk about new solutions to new problems.
That's right.
And that is, I think, the signal failure of our generation of Black intellectuals.
That's right.
More often than not, we resort to romantic Black nationalism or to some other way to assuage the guilt that we feel, and everybody in here knows what I'm talking about leaving that community behind.
Right.
But I don't know what Skip is talking about. I feel.
All right, I'm not going to play the bell hooks part, but that particular clip was very illustrative of what I'm talking about by divested politics, right? These are folks who are saying, okay, hey, there are many Black communities. There's no, we are not a monolith, right? You hear that a lot on campus, right? There's, different subsets of who we are, right? These are people who resent the idea of Black nationalism. They want nothing to do with it because that would mean we would have to move and operate as a people, right? And they don't want to be a part of this. They're trying to figure out how to align themselves with the group that has power and not with the group that is powerless. And it's a very interesting dynamic when you listen to divestors, right? Because when they say they've given up on the community, the level of dissonance that you can kind of like pull out of them just by having a conversation, because it shows some crazy contradictions and also some levels of self-hate. And what do I mean by that? People will say that the relationships in the Black community are beyond repair. But at the same time, the relationship with me as an individual Black person with the white community, oh no, that's certainly fixable. But why is it fixable? It's because the white community has power, right? You'll say all these negative things about the black community, but listen, this community has historically enslaved you. They're killing your people to this day. They're keeping your people impoverished to this day. They're attacking and waging war on your people to this day. But you can forgive all of that because you see the potential to gain or access power by aligning with them. You see the black community is powerless. So you're like, why would I want to be a part of a powerless entity? I'm going to divest from that. But the game is you can't escape from blackness. You can't escape from the burden of blackness. That's why all of these politics at their core, many of them are just suicidal politics. You know what I mean? Again, cultural unicism or political unicism, it's ensuring I'm adopting a set of politics that will ensure that A, my culture does not reproduce itself, but more importantly, my people do not reproduce themselves, right? So that's what it's all about. I'm adopting a set of politics that keeps me powerless, the political unicism of divested politics. Right. So what I want to do now is I want to take a moment to deal with who I consider as perhaps the biggest political eunuch in this space today. And that is BGS Ibmore. This is an older brother. I believe he's in his 60s. And quite often, you know, the intellectuals in this particular space, I'm talking about the manosphere, bring him on to their panels so that he can essentially say the things that they would like to say, but due to their positions within white institutions, right, within the academy, they can't say them, right? So they have plausible deniability by bringing somebody like BGS onto their platform and having him say all the things that they would like to say, right? But it's him saying it. It's not them. But it really is them. He's there for a reason, right? So the first person I want to deal with is a brother by the name of Dr. Thunder. And he recently had BGS on his platform. And the name of the episode was Can the Black Community Be Saved, right? Very similar to Dr. T. Hasan Johnson. His episode was, let me see again. His episode was, Is it time for black men to let go of the black love velvet painting? But we're gonna deal with that at the end of this segment. But can the black community be saved? Right. So I want to play this segment right here in its entirety. It's about 8 minutes, but I'll play it at double speed or about speed and a half. And then as soon as it's over, I'll give a quick annotation to it. All right. So let me go ahead and play that, and then I'll come back and give my remarks. All right, here we go.
But, I'm trying to create a community of folks, different kind of folks, to be willing to have some of these kind of conversations. So I'm hoping, I'm praying that we can have men of a certain type and women of a certain type to get together and to be able to hash some of this stuff out and have real conversations. And maybe some folks take some responsibility for their part in it and move forward. But if I'm honest, it just seems to me like it's too far gone. In your thoughts, now this is a big question, and you can go anywhere you'd like to with it. In our community, the black community, what do you see as the primary issues?
So let me just stop here really quick, because I have to say this. So when Dr. Thunder is saying, if I'm honest, it seems like the black community is already gone. I mean, that's his position. You know, he's on the save yourself black man perspective, right? There's no hope for the black community. That's already his position. So him laying up this question is his way of allowing BGS to come on and lay out his entire thesis as to why Dr. Thunder is right to have arrived at that conclusion, right? Because BGS, again, he's a save yourself black man. He's already stated that he's very happy that his son, doesn't date black women, right? So he's on the divested politics train. So I want you to hear this argument that BGS lays out. And it sounds really good to people who don't know history, to people who don't read. And I think that because they hold him up in this space as the so-called master teacher, he's able to spin and weave these narratives together based upon conjecture and half-truths and whole lies, right? So I'm going to let him speak, and then I'm going to come back and just knock that shit right out of the box. All right, so here we go.
Okay, there's the basic fundamental primary issue is that you talk about the American Black community, right? The ADOS community, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
ADOS, yeah.
Okay, and this is the fundamental issue is that you have thousands of different disparate groups that were under the Black umbrella thrown together from different cultures and then bred to serve a purpose. So the culture that gave you is a slave culture, which is something the Moynihan report actually talked about. First thing he said, the culture, basically what Black people have is a incomplete or broken culture. It was designed to serve a purpose of capitalism, basically to be machines, to be a little bit more than farm animals. That's something they call it chattel slavery. You're a little bit more than cattle. So you take a disparate group, you actually breed them and give them a breeding pattern, a breeding culture, and you actually because of that because of maternal instinct, they set the woman ahead of the family. In other words, the women actually are head of the family in the Black culture. The Black culture is a matriarchy. I call it a gynocracy, which is ruled by women. And the thing is, it functions opposite to everybody else's culture. And so when it was internal, you could actually hold it together, even though it's dysfunctional. I mean, you can go back and read E. Franklin Frazier's book, The Negro Family in the United States, which is what the Moynihan Report was actually named after, which now everyone I see people talk about the Moynihan Report, they never talk about Frazier's book. They always skip over it. Okay. Basically, Frazier's book is what the majority of what the Moynihan Report was actually drawn upon. And Frazier talks about the dysfunction going back in the slave culture. And if you actually investigate it, because I actually did, it's called the American Slave Codes, about why Thomas Jefferson in Virginia and South Carolina started this breeding program after cutting off the external slave trade, is because they wanted to breed slaves. They didn't want people coming in that knew freedom because it caused problems. And plus they got less for their slaves. So you started this internal breeding culture where 91% of us actually come from. And then when you release these people, you never allow them to actually fix their culture, become a more cohesive, organic culture. So what we have is an artificial culture that's been pieced up and clung onto. And then in the 1960s, since they wanted to integrate us, they tried to slowly but surely change their culture and actually make it a patriarchy, or what closer to a patriarchy, or closer to a nuclear family, which it wasn't before. And that didn't work. One, because the liberals and the feminists and the Black women didn't want to change. So even 50 years, 60 years later, you still have the same thing. And that's the fundamental problem. That is the fundamental problem, is that the cultural defects that is in the ADOS community, in the ADOS culture, subculture, never got fixed. And then you would pour racism on top of that, it just makes it worse. So we're living in a modern culture that needs to be functional. Under slavery, under Jim Crow, it's functional because that's what it's designed for. Outside of that, you can see the dysfunction. And basically, Moynihan saw it early, because if you look up the Moynihan scissors, right, that's why he wanted to have wrote the Moynihan Report, because his job was to integrate these Black people coming out, because basically machines were taking over agriculture and there was no place for Black people on the farm anymore, okay, where they were. So you have to integrate them into the cities, into the urban areas, and make them functional and fit in with everybody else. And so that was his job. That was his job, tasked by not only Kennedy, but also Johnson. And what he tried to do was actually train Black men to get jobs just like white men. And what he noticed is that with the Monahan scissors is that every other culture, when the men got jobs and the men started making money, welfare went down, okay? Except for who? The black culture. The men got jobs, they earned more money, and basically welfare started increasing, and he couldn't figure it out. That's how come they had the Monahan report. What he found out is that, black culture, ADOS culture runs backward or counterculture to white culture. And then when you mix in feminism, all that kind of stuff, intersexual feminism, all that kind of, you just make it even worse. So, but the thing is that you have a culture that's never been fixed, is what he said, right? And his job, Johnson's job, civil rights, was to actually start repairing that culture. The culture's never been repaired. And you keep dashing things on top of it. And so what you have now is a completely dysfunctional culture where black men and women can't even talk to each other anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I know this is a lot, and people might not believe it.
No, I asked you a big question. That was a pretty, that was a well thought out, definitive, answer. This divide between black men and black women. Oh man,
they were never together. That's the problem. They were never together. They were never together. She was not. They didn't bring black women over here to be your spouse. They bring black women over here to breed for the slave master. That's what they brought her over, to serve the white woman and to breed for the slave master. Okay, and that never got fixed. And you go on the continent. Okay, you have matriarchies on the continent, but the thing is, there's rules. There's male rules actually.
All right, I'm just going to stop right there and just knock a lot of this shit out of the park very easily. Now, I wanted to be fair and allow that entire segment to play. Allow him to, you heard the question and you heard the answer in its entirety, right? So where do I even start? I definitely have some sources here, right? Because, you got to source up, right? So, wow. First and foremost, I say it from the very beginning. It's easy to weave together a narrative when you're the smartest person in the room, right? When you're in a space where people don't read and don't know history and they kind of look up to you and hold on to your nuts as this old wise sage. Nah. What he just did there was piece together half-truths, whole lies to uphold a narrative that will allow him to maintain the conclusion that he's already reached. The conclusion being that the black community is over, black man, go your own way, save yourself, it's a wrap, right? So it allows him to kind of undergird, his divested politics with some type of historical authority. But again, false historical narratives don't do anything but actually perpetuate the problem, right? You can't really, it's like when you go to the doctors, right? The doctor always wants to know the history of the patient, because that's going to help the doctor to determine the best kind of course of treatment, right? So if you lie to the doctor about your history, your medical history, and the history of your family, then the course of treatment that they come up with you, right, the treatment plan is not going to work, right? So the treatment plan that he's developing, again, is based on a false historical narrative. So let's address a couple of things very quick and very, very fast, right? He started off by saying that the basic fundamental issue is that we were never a people. Right. We were thousands of different or disparate groups. His thesis is essentially we're not a people, and our culture was not created internally. It was created externally. And as a result, we have these baked in cultural defects. Right. So our culture is defective. Right. So our defective culture is the thing that's creating the problems in the black community. Right. So you see where I'm going with this. Right. So let me just push back very easily. First and foremost, black people have agency. And this is the importance of having an Afrocentric analysis. Because when you look at things through an Afrocentric lens, you place yourself at the center of the table. Right? You're examining the phenomena through your own eyes, not as an external party looking in. You aren't looking at black people through the eyes of white people. And that's what BGS is doing with this particular analysis. We have agency. We were not inanimate objects that were just picked up and placed here and turned into chattel, like no different than a horse. Like, no, we developed a culture. We developed families. We developed systems, and these things were not defective, right? So let me get into this. Fuck everything that the Moynihan report says about the black family. The entire structure of American society, all of its politics, all of its traditions, and all of its institutions are designed to tear apart the black family. And a lot of that attack focuses on the black man. They do this because they don't desire for us to be here. It's a form of ethnic cleansing. Right. So I'm going to just I went over this already before. Right. I'm just give you a couple of points here and then I'm going to tap out. But I went over this before. I think I did it in the very beginning with the first. I think it was the prelude to the podcast. So you can go back and check that out. But I'll start here very quickly. Back in 1751, Benjamin Franklin, when they were starting to think about that, you know, the economy would be transforming and getting more industrialized based upon what was happening over in Europe, they already saw that slavery would be coming to an end eventually. So how do you prepare for that eventuality? They didn't want black people to be here after our use was up, right? We were depreciated or fully depreciated assets. Our useful lives had come and gone. So now the question is, how do you deal with the Negro problem? What is the Negro problem? How do you get rid of this unwanted population in a humane way and uphold your ideals that you're Christian and liberal and all this sort of other nonsense, right? So Franklin wrote in Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind and Peopling of Countries. Here's the major takeaway from that entire essay. He says, people increase in proportion to the number of marriages, and that is greater in proportion to the ease and convenience of supporting a family. When families can be easily supported, more persons marry and earlier in life, right? So when we look at what's happening in the black community, where he talks about the black community as a matriarchy, first of all, there is literally no such thing as a matriarchy. It cannot be found anywhere in history. It does not exist. The black community has never existed under a so-called matriarchy. It's existed under the system of white supremacy, where the penalty for manhood is death, which is why black men were socialized to be boys or cultural eunuchs. Because to be a man and to do what men are meant to do means death under this particular system. This isn't a matriarchy. You can't look historically anywhere and find anything called a so-called matriarchy. It doesn't exist. It's a theory. And it's a knee-jerk reaction that many people have when they say, well, patriarchy's here, so there must be a matriarchy, right? The opposite of patriarchy must be matriarchy. Like, no. You have matrilineal societies. You have matrifocal societies. But they aren't matriarchies or gynocracies, as this shit that BGS likes to talk about. But the reason why I wanted to read that point from Franklin, because Franklin was very clear. A key way to destroy this particular black community is to make sure that the men in that community remain perpetually unemployed. So when, Moynihan is doing this report and talking about, the community being upside down economically and black men being perpetually unemployed, yes. Because those are the policies of the society meant to destroy this particular community, right? Franklin goes on to say, I'm just going to read this here because I want to get into some other things about the black family. I want to answer some of the other points that he raised. Franklin was clear. He said, why increase the sons of Africa by planting them here in America, where we have so fair an opportunity by excluding all blacks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He was clear. We don't want black people here. This is going to be a white nation. So all of the policies, traditions, and institutions in this nation at their very core are designed to tear apart that relationship between black men and black women because they're designed to tear apart the black family. Because the hope is that by destroying the black family, you can convince these individuals to adopt these divested politics or suicidal politics, and then that community will just die off slowly. That's what the hope is. But I want to answer a couple of his other points that he raised here, where he talked about, we've never been a family. He ended by saying the black man and the black woman have never been together. That's bullshit. We had agency, and family was so important to our people and to our culture. I want to read here two excerpts from the book written by Sterling Stuckey, the book Slave Culture, Nationalist Theory, and the Foundations of Black America. The first excerpt I'm going to read comes from page 49. This is, again, stressing the importance of family, right? During the colonial period. We've always had family. We've always had agency. We've always seek to bond with one another and build families, even under this system. So the fact that he's saying, we were just disparate groups or, inanimate objects, and our culture was created externally, to meet the needs of the slave master, and we didn't develop our own culture, and what we have is a defective culture. So that's the problem. Like, no, this is a bunch of bullshit. The conditions that you see playing out between us are not due to the fact that we have a defective culture as a people. The conditions that you see playing out between us is due to the fact that the cultural matrix that we exist within as a people, i.e. the system of racism, white supremacy, all of its tenets in their entirety are designed to destroy and eradicate the black family. And that's including the white supremacist politics that you've adopted, i.e. save yourself, black men. Any of these divested politics only uphold what they're trying to do to us. There's nothing revolutionary about it. Introspective black men of reform. What are you reforming? Yourself into a white man? You're like, is that what's going to happen? All right, so I want to read this here from Sterling Stuckey. Again, there's two excerpts I want to read. They both come from Slave Culture, Nationalist Theory, and the Foundations of Black America. So let me go ahead and get started. Okay, so this starts here on page 49. Born into slavery in 1843, Simon participated in the most sacred of rituals in the 1850s by the age of 13. A common practice in slave communities in both the North and the South. As children, within a year or two after they were able to walk, joined in some ceremonies, especially in the ring shout. In fact, slave culture was, despite its centeredness upon the elders and ancestors, a culture in which the very young played a more vital role than scholars have assigned them. The preference of slaveholders for African males aged 16 or under helped determine that role, as did the importance of family to Africans. It's always important to give us agency. We weren't slaves, we were enslaved. Enslaved Africans. Even under the conditions of the institution of slavery, family was the bedrock of the community we sought to establish with one another. I'll read that again, that last sentence. It says, the preference of slaveholders for African males aged 16 or under helped determine that role, as did the importance of family to Africans. Again, this is coming from Slave Culture, Nationalist Theory, and the Foundations of Black America, right? He's talking about here, in our culture, three things were extremely important to our traditions here under this particular system. What were they? Our elders, our ancestors, and family. BGS said, oh no, we were just disparate groups, that were given a culture externally. We were never together, we were put together just to breed for the system. Black women were just breeding machines. It's like, oh, we didn't have any agency, huh? We have no agency. We have no culture, huh? I'm about to disprove all of that because it's nonsense. It's complete nonsense. Let me read this second excerpt that I have here. This comes from page 87, same text. It's a bit longer, so bear with me. It says, Africans were so given to secret societies and their purposes and characteristics were generally so similar that a great many ceremonies across Central and West Africa involving the use of masks and costumes, signs that ancestral figures are being represented, might resemble and be related to John Coonering, and might have enabled Africans from various parts of Africa to identify with and join in Coonering in North Carolina, since masks are used universally to represent ancestral figures. Let me pause really quick. Just like in Haiti, a lot of our African ancestors hid their African traditions under Roman Catholicism. You see the same thing here in America. The John Coonering celebration was a celebration that Africans engaged in around and during the Christmas holiday, because the European Christmas looked very similar to an African tradition that we had. So in the United States, that tradition was referred to as John Coonering. You might not know about this history, but if you read Sterling Stuckey, he breaks it down for you. But again, BGS will tell you, our culture was given to us by them folk. It's a defective culture because it's only a culture meant to reproduce slaves. Really? We ain't had no agency. We ain't have no resistance. The black men and the black women didn't cooperate. How do we end slavery without the cooperation of the black man and the black woman? How do we get this far to where we are without the cooperation between those two entities? I need to know. Make it make sense, because it don't make sense to me. I know when you're lying, because I know what the history says. So you can be selective about what pieces of history you choose to read from. But those who are a bit more informed know when to call bullshit. I don't care how old you are, you're speaking bullshit. Okay? Let me keep reading here. It says, moreover, a number of African secret societies excluded women and children, keeping them at distance during their ceremonies, as in the case of the Igun. Yet, one Igun ceremony bears, it appears, directly on Coonering. Referring to that ceremony, Talbot remarks, in several ways it resembles the European Christmas, as it is an occasion for the reunion of the family and of friends, and is treated as a general holiday. This is black people during the Christmas season doing their own African tradition, because we were given a bit more leeway under the system during the holiday period. We ain't celebrating their white Christmas. We celebrating our own tradition, which centers around what? Family and friends, us coming together. This was a central part of our culture and remains a central part of our culture, despite the attacks that our family system is undergoing. And meanwhile, you got these suicidal niggas talking about, oh, we ain't never been together. Like, what are you talking about? Let me keep on reading here. It says, referring to that ceremony, Talbot remarks, in several ways, it resembles European Christmas, as it is an occasion for the reunion of the family and of friends, and it is treated as a general holiday. Presents are given, and the play is repeated in the various quarters of town, i.e. the slave quarters, right? It says, such practices are not that dissimilar from crooning in North Carolina, where Africans found reinforcement for Igun-type practices in the Christmas season, right? The same thing you see in Haiti, where you see the synchronization, where it's like, okay, that's a European holiday. It looks similar to something we did African. So we're going to let that's their holiday. That's a dominant society, but we're going to practice our own thing under that. We ain't practicing Christmas. It might look like Christmas to the uninitiated eye, but we practicing our own thing. Why? Because we had cultural retention. We are people. Y'all act like, like word of mouth doesn't pass down. It's like, oh no, we was just on breeding forums and 91% of us come from kind of like breeding forums. Oh, we ain't had no culture. We don't have no cultural retention. Because our women were forced to breed children, that means that the culture went away and we didn't have our own culture and way of doing things. It's all lies. But again, I'm gonna break it all down because it's easy to break down because it's a lie. A lie doesn't stand to the candle of truth. Darkness, you light that candle of truth, that light is always going to expunge darkness. That's just what it is. Like I said, all I got to do is sit the clean glass of water next to the dirty glass. I showed you the dirty glass. You got to hear BGS more speak. Now I'm sitting the clean glass right next to it so you can differentiate from the bullshit. All right? It says, let me go on here. Knowing that in North America, Christmas was the main religious period for the dominant group, i.e. white people, when families gathered, exchanged gifts, worshiped, and enjoyed the festivities of the occasion, the slaves took advantage of that time to revive African cultural expression along somewhat similar lines. Since in Africa, exchange of gifts at reunions of family and friends on holidays were not uncommon, especially on important religious occasions. Exchange of gifts such as they were among slaves, were often accompanied by the receipt of gifts from the master and, in the context of John Coonering, presents in the form of donations after performances, right? So when this brother is trying to say to you that we had this so-called culture that was given to us from the white man, we had our own culture because we have agency. And that agency is what allowed us to resist. It's what allowed us to know that we were not our conditions. We were enslaved. We were not slaves, right? That's what allowed us to maintain that bond, and that group and cohesive identity that allowed us to survive this harsh environment together. You don't get that as we weren't no horses or cows. We were people, right? Let me read one other important text, because remember, BGS made this declarative claim that the black man and the black woman were never together, right? This is sister Dr. Tara W. Hunter. I believe she released this book either in 2018 or 2019, but I talked about it in a previous lecture, so I'm just gonna pull up a slide very easily. The book is Bound in Wedlock: Slave and Free Black Marriage in the 19th Century, right? So according to this sister and her research, her scholarly research on BGS, I know you like to read, you can go read this book, right? So Bound in Wedlock, it says, according to her, by the end of the 19th century, African-American marriage rates were slightly higher than whites. Let me read here. It says, the gap between the nearly universal marriage rates in which blacks outpace whites and the more disparate rates in the formation of two-parent families in which whites overtook blacks is revealing. It indicates that while African Americans showed strong inclinations to use marriage as a strategy to advance their social and economic survival, they were not always able to translate that into viable households they could sustain. You hear that? We saw family and marriage as crucial to our survival in this nation. This dude talking about, we were never together. I guess the black men, just forced the black woman to marry them. I guess that's what happened. I guess they didn't cooperate because they understood it was in their best interest to do so. But let you tell it, none of this ever existed. I guess at the end of the 19th century, when our marriage rates were outpacing that of white people, we were married at higher rates than white people. It was due to the fact that, the slave master forced us to do it. Nah, this is all a bunch of bullshit. This is the end of the 19th century, post-emancipation. She goes on to say here, she says, by 1899, African Americans had literally traveled far and wide in search of lost family members and done all they could to reconstitute their kinship ties. Legal marriage provided an important foundation for them to fully access and secure their rights to spouses, children, and the integrity of their households. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Because what you're saying doesn't agree with the history. You're weaving together a narrative to fit your own agenda. You're discarding the history because the history is inconvenient for your divested politics. You're a political eunuch. You need to feel comfortable in your lack of manhood. So you use lies to uphold your foundation instead of the truth, because the truth is just going to reveal you for the coward that you are. I see what it is. Our people worked hard to build these families. What did she say, Sarah? She says, although it didn't translate into households they could sustain. Why didn't it? Because the state policy was to keep black men perpetually unemployed. Because the state does not want black households. It doesn't want black families. So how do you destroy this community? What did Benjamin Franklin says? He said, people are going to marry and reproduce based upon how easy it is to provide for a family. So we have to make it extremely difficult for them to provide for a family. And then, we have to create vagrancy laws So now that, the black man is unemployed, perpetually underemployed, let's lock him up for that status. Let's criminalize him. You blaming that on us so-called having defective culture and not the policies of this society that you're trying to integrate into or marry into. You're blaming it on us. How dare you? How dare you? You blaming it on black women in the gynocracy, talking about you a general in a war against black women. What type of foolishness is this coming from a 62-year-old male? You're not in a war against the true enemy. You're in a war against black women, a war of attrition. What type of nonsense is this? But I get it and I see it. That's why I call it out. Like my brother Bomani said last week, y'all ain't gonna be able to ignore me for too long. All I gotta do is keep lighting the candle. The light is always gonna expunge the darkness. All right, family, let me go to a quick commercial. And when we come right back, I will, as I promised, I will go into the Hasan Johnson clip, which made me title today's presentation, The Political Eunuchism of Divested Politics. I'll go into that, and then we'll close out, and we'll have a good discussion in the office hours. All right, let's check out my next commercial. Malcolm X once said that education is our passport to the future. And at VPAC 2020, they're doing just that. The school's founder, Dr. Offset, believes that learning is an activity, not compliance. VPAC is designed for families who are exhausted with racism and systemic oppression in public school education and want an educational experience that supports self-directed, project-based learning and a holistic approach that is culturally relevant. VPAC is student-led, facilitator-guided, parent-invested, and community-supported that allows every student to unleash their true genius. VPAC.
A political chump. The party that you backed controls 2/3 of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and still they can't keep their promise to you, because you're a chump. Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
I think it extends far beyond black people who hold political office. Like I would be speaking to, your entertainers, your celebrities. It's really anybody, any black person who has a vested interest in maintaining the political status quo because their economic livelihood is tied to this current situation. So therefore, they collectively, work every 4 years to get out the black vote.
As you know, today there was a big problem. In Philadelphia, they went in to watch. They're called poll watchers, a very safe, very nice thing. They were thrown out. They weren't allowed to watch. You know why? Because bad things happen in Philadelphia, bad things.
The way it's interpreted by the Democrat crooked machine of Philadelphia.
I'm arguing for new ways and means of organizing locally, where we organize our power collectively, economically, culturally, to build up ourselves and our communities. And I think that we can do that without engaging with the system as it currently stands.
All right, shout out to the Un-American Dilemma. Shout out to my good folks over at VPAC, especially you, Dr. Offset. I really appreciate all the solid work that you're doing. Family, go over there and support their campaign, support their fundraiser. Go check out the website for VPAC. That sister is doing amazing work, and I want us here at the Race, Manhood, and Power podcast to be supporters of that work. So make sure y'all go and check that out. As far as the Un-American Dilemma, if you haven't seen it yet, I threw it up in the Patreon. So if you've enrolled in the African War College, you can actually watch it. But if you want to be a supporter and purchase it, the link to it is right in the description box. So you can purchase it right on my Vimeo today. All right. Let me get back into it, family. This is the last clip, like I said, this was pretty much my inspiration for doing the show today. This particular segment from Dr. T. Hasan Johnson. Now, the segment in its entirety that I'm talking about is probably about 25 minutes long. But I can't do all of that just given the time. So y'all can definitely go check out the full video on your own. The entire video is about 3 hours. Now, just to give you context, what's happening here, they're talking about the ways in which Black nationalism was ill-equipped or was unprepared to deal with the Black feminist movement. And Dr. Ron is talking about, or prior to this clip, right? Because I'm giving you context around what I'm about to play. He's talking about, him used to be a Black nationalist, and in the early 90s, he at first, kind of like got turned on to this Black male independence movement, meaning like the save yourself Black man, right? Anybody, I'm going to tell you this, and I want you to always remember this. Anybody, I don't care if it is a Black male or a Black female, anybody who was preaching disillusion between the Black man and Black woman as a pathway to Black liberation is literally trying to liberate you from this earth. They trying to liberate you from this planet. It is completely suicide. There is no path forward for the Black man without the Black woman, and there is no path forward for the Black woman without the Black man. It is impossible. I want you to understand that, and I want you to be very clear. If you willing to go with hat in hand and attempt to repair the relationship with white supremacy, then why aren't you willing to go and have a conversation with your woman and figure this thing out so we can get on the same page and move forward together? Why are you throwing your woman away and saying that, oh no, that's just irredeemable, it's irreparable, there's nothing that can be done, she's just unreasonable? Is she? Have you had a conversation with her? Because one thing I've been doing is I've been listening to both sides. I'm like, both sides have valid points. They like need a mediator so they can have a productive conversation. Like, Black man, are you listening to your Black woman? Black woman, are you listening to your Black man? This is what needs to be happening. More conversation, not less conversation. And you'll find, what I found, is that our unhealed trauma is really the greatest weapon being used against us. Because on both sides, there is real feelings of rejection, real feelings of betrayal. And those things need to be dealt with in order to repair that relationship. But to say that I'm not going to repair that relationship and I'm just going to accept my death and I'm going to go ahead and cut my nuts off and put it in a box and hand it to the white man and ask him for a better station in life, I can't never get with that. I can't do that. I can't get with the political unicism. I can't say Black nationalism is dead. Garvey said, as long as other men never give up on the idea of a Negro nation, as long as other people have them, you shall have one. Because if you don't have your own nation, I always tell y'all, right? I say manhood is what? It's a system of order, protection, and direction that's expressed through institutions that are capable of meeting the vital needs of a people. What happens when you don't have institutions? You don't have manhood. So you have to go and borrow or access somebody else's manhood. Let me go use the white man's institutions. He built his. Well, I got to build my own. That's not manhood. That's hypergamous manhood. We talked about that. So to say that nationalism is dead means to say that Black manhood is dead. You don't have your own nation. Like, you think you're going to be a man in somebody else's house? You really think it's going to play out like that? You really think he going to let you be a man in his house? You don't believe that. Just say that, okay, I've accepted the role of the beta. I've accepted the role of his woman. I've been bred to be no different than a little white girl. The Black male is no different than the white female teenager. You know what I mean? Like, just say that. Say that you've accepted that. Because if you're saying that nationalism is dead, you are clearly saying that manhood is dead. So without nationalism, where are you going to get your sovereignty from? Without sovereignty, where do you get your manhood from? These are real questions. But let me go ahead and play this segment. It's about 7 minutes long. I'll let it play in its entirety, and then we'll wrap up and get out of here.
And nobody would say anything, but the idea was, you weren't supposed, as long as you stayed away from a white woman, you were cool. But then you started seeing brothers dealing more internationally with black women from elsewhere. And it was kind of a quiet frustration that I began to hear from American black women, but nobody really would talk about it openly, right? So you guys are hitting at some of the main points that I think play a role in this. But, what do we say to brothers who are living this, but going through the failure of this idea? What do you say to brothers who are still trying to live this out?
Oh, man, you know what? Man, see, here's the deal. The black nationalists knew very early on that you don't have any black nationalism without the black family. It can't exist.
Right.
So they have to buy into this idea. I mean, at a rudimentary, basic level. Otherwise, nationalism is dead. I mean, how can you buy into it, black nationalism, without the black family? First of all, you can't reproduce yourself. You can't have the value system reproduced also, within the context of an interracial family. I mean,
let me pause right there. When he's saying that they have to buy into this idea, he's talking about the idea of black love between a black man and a black woman. That's what he's talking about when he say they have to buy into this idea. Remember, this whole show is about the so-called black love velvet painting. You know what I mean? This aspirational idea of the black man and black woman kind of like working together. Like, yes, things are fucked up between us. We know that. We know that there's blame on both sides. But I'm not going to sit here and point fingers at one another, especially when I understand the cultural milieu is designed to maintain that friction and to pull us further apart. I'm going to recognize the context in which I exist. And when you understand that context, yes, black love does become a revolutionary act because it is counter your death. It is counter your extinguishment, your eradication, your ethnic cleansing. So yeah, the black nationalists cannot give up on the idea of working out his relationship with his woman. The problem that a lot of these so-called dudes who call themselves black nationalists have is you've imbibed a set of values that are not your own. You are practicing a culture that is not your own, and you want your woman to uphold those ideals, which are detrimental to her health and humanity. And you don't even want to uphold the ideals of manhood because you want to have this relationship with your woman within another man's house. So you mad at her because she won't submit. Meanwhile, this whole concept of submission is very homoerotic and comes out of their situation. It's not how we relate to one another. Cooperation and submission are very different. We both give deference to one another. There's a history here. If you're not drawn from that deep well of your own, then you're drawn from somebody else's. And that's really the problem. That's why you really can't get along with the sister. And that's why she can't get along with you, because both of y'all are really drawn from wells that are not your own. So we have to address the real problem. We can't be spinning these false narratives. But there was one other point that he made here about not being able to reproduce your culture in that way. And that is the exact definition of cultural unicism. What did I say at the beginning? Cultural unicism is so that you do not reproduce your culture. Political unicism is so that you do not reproduce your people. Right? Political unicism is suicide or genocide because you've adopted the politic of death. You've adopted the politic of removal. You've adopted to save yourself, black man. Go your own way, black woman. That's what you've adopted. So anybody that says to me that that this thing is irredeemable, irreparable. So you mean to tell me that the relationship between you and your woman is not repairable, but the relationship between you and your enemy and the people who are warring upon you are? It is? You can repair that relationship? The folks who enslave you, who took your humanity, who castrated you, who raped your children, who raped your woman, you can, I'm cool with that. I can go marry the white man. I'm cool with that. But your woman is like, nah, that's a step too far. I can't repair it with her. Fuck her. I told y'all what this thing is about. You're just trying to align with the power. That's what it is. And I'm open to discussion with anybody who want to have this discussion. Because like I said, I'm going to stand on the history. I'm going to stand on the truth. Let me keep playing this.
How you going to tell your white wife, power to the people and all that, but what I guess what they didn't realize was that, eventually the social forces that existed, in their surrounding environment would just kill nationalism. It's dead, bruh. I'm sorry. I hate to be the one to bear the bad news, but it's over, bruh.
I don't know what the brother means by we didn't realize. It is very well documented that the social, political, and institutional forces were targeted at destroying Black nationalism and destroying the relationship between Black men and Black women. That's what COINTELPRO is all about. I mean, they mentioned nationalism several times throughout that particular document, COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, right? In the Book of Five Rings, written by Miyamoto Musashi, he has a quote where he says, "The important thing in strategy is to suppress the enemy's useful actions, but allow his useless actions." So yeah, nationalism, that's a threat. You got to suppress that. You got to destroy that. This other shit, this divestment politics, let that shit flourish. Suppress his useful actions. Allow the actions that are not going to do anything about his power. He'll remain powerless. So yeah, no, we understand that nationalism is under attack. We understand that to say that you're a nationalist, not these types of nationalists, because they do the same thing that the ADOS people do. They say, I used to be a Pan-Africanist. I spoke on this before. Everybody used to be a Pan-Africanist. It's the same thing here. I used to be a Black nationalist. The dude Ron Neal says it several times. I used to be a Black nationalist. I guess in theory, you were sympathetic to Black nationalist texts, so that makes you a Black nationalist. Until you woke up. And now you're out here saying, there's a part in this video where he's saying he's so proud and he's so hopeful for Generation Z because the Black men and Black children in Generation Z don't even have a concept of racial loyalty. And he's saying this is a beautiful thing. He's happy to see that occur. That Black men are not burdened by this concept of being loyal to their race. This is complete political unicism. This is complete Black male castration. Anybody talking like that, that's celebrating their children not being loyal. BGS has done it. I'm happy that my son doesn't date any Black women. Come on. This is what we're dealing with. I'm just calling it out. I'm just putting it on full display.
Yeah. These women, they're not what they used to be, man. These ain't Fannie Lou Hamers no more, bro. This ain't I forget what's Emmett Till's mother's name? Mamie. There ain't no Mamies no more, bro.
Ain't no George Jacksons, bro. It ain't no Sekou Odengas, bro. It ain't no Malcolm X's, bro. We are challenged on both sides. But are you saying that we don't have the ability to remake ourselves? Y'all call yourselves, I don't know if brother Green Gorilla calls himself introspective Black men of reform. But are you saying that you can only reform within the confines that white supremacy will allow you to? Or are you saying that you're a man and that you can practice Sankofa? You can look back in order to project yourself forward. If we've done it before, we can do it again. Our people came out of slavery. We came out of that institution and remade ourselves, reconstituted ourselves. Why can't we do it now? See, I don't believe in this defeatist nonsense. In fact, as an organizer being very active on the grassroots, I'll tell you I work with a lot of Fannie Lou Hamers. I work with a lot of Assata Shakurs. That's why I could never disrespect black women in the way that y'all do. Because I see them. I see greater in them. The black men who I work with, a lot of Malcolm X's. You understand what I'm saying? So I could never just say, oh, it's a wrap. Nationalism is dead. Because if nationalism is dead, manhood is dead. And then I might as well just go ahead and cut my dick off, put it in the box, walk to the white man and say, I'm willing to do what you need me to do so I can have a better lot in life. That's what I may as well do. Let's go ahead and cut it off myself and hand it to him. Here you go. I don't need this anymore. The fuck I'm going to do with this?
I'm sorry, but right now what you got is you might have a woman clothe herself in the garb of neo-soul. Okay? They might look the part, but they ain't playing the part. You know, because it's the same way that you got Erykah Badu talking about $3 and $6. You know, she's still telling Tyrone, you know, she still got some lip for Tyrone. Okay. You know what I mean? You know, you better call him. Don't mess with me. You better call Tyrone. So this.
All right, listen, I'm not even gonna keep playing this entire thing. I think I've laid out my point. Y'all understand where I'm going with this, right? The political unicism of divested politics. I'm addressing all these forms of divestment from the black community. I don't care if it's ADOS and FBA trying to divest from the larger Pan-African or global black community. I don't care if it's black men trying to divest from black women or vice versa. I don't care if it's the black elite trying to divest from the black masses. I don't care. All these forms of divestment are only meant to perpetuate our current condition. There is no winning. There's no winning in that. There's only winning in our unity and in our coming together and in our being willing to fight. Right? Being a cultural eunuch means that you'll be developed to be anything except a soldier, except a warrior, except a fighter. You're not going to be concerned with fighting for your liberation. Right? People who did that, you know, if you're a divester, I guess Assata Shakur, she's a mammy. I guess Malcolm X, he's a simp. Because that's how your consciousness has just been so screwed up. So no, nationalism is not dead. Because I don't believe that black manhood is dead. I believe that black manhood is in its weakest state ever, but not dead. I believe that we have it within us to reach down and pull our manhood up. And I believe that we can do that together as black men. But we ain't going to do it without black women, and we ain't going to do it without black children. We cannot be divided. We have to figure out a way to bring this thing back together. And that's what the Race, Manhood, and Power podcast is all about. So I want to end tonight. I just want to read really quick a very short excerpt from Mama Assata from her letter to my people. And it says here, it says, Black brothers, black sisters, I want you to know that I love you. And I hope that somewhere in your heart you have love for me. My name is Assata Shakur, and I'm a revolutionary. A black revolutionary. By that, I mean that I am a field nigga who is determined to be free by any means necessary. By that, I mean that I can never be free unless all of my people are free along with me. And by that, I mean I have declared war on all forces that have raped our women, castrated our men, and kept our babies empty-bellied. Black men, we've been castrated for too long. We've been without manhood for too long. We have to step up and man up and do what men are meant to do for their people. If you're talking about save yourself, black man, you're not a man. If you're talking about abandoning your community, you're not a man. If you're talking about abandoning your own nation, the idea that nations do not exist and you'll never have one, you're not a man. you have to man up. We got to figure out a way to work out this situation with our sisters. There's no other way around it. And we cannot seek to do that, right? We can't have these maladaptive reforms trying to impose Christian values and, these Eurocentric assimilationist and capitalist principles onto our community. No, we got to reject that. We got to reject that. So this was the political unicism of Divested Politics. I hope that y'all enjoyed the discussion. I hope you learned a lot. This has been another Manhood Monday with the Race, Manhood, and Power podcast. And as always, I'll be here every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until next time, tap in, lock in, and man up. Peace.